Hello, everyone, and welcome to this awesome webinar, Coaching in the Time of COVID, 9 Plays for the Strongest School Year Ever. I'm excited to be joined today by Donna Spangler, who is an instructional coach, and she'll introduce herself here in a minute. But I'm excited for you to be here, excited for the opportunity to chat with you. Additional information about this, including the recording, can be found at jethrojones.com/coaches. So make sure that you go check that out. That's jethrojones.com/coaches. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Donna.
So thank you, Jethro. So take a couple minutes and introduce myself. On the next slide, you'll see that I am an instructional coach. I'm a department chair of instructional coaches in the Derry Township School District, and that's in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I have been an instructional coach. This is now my 4th year. I have been in education for 29 as a teacher. I am also the co-president of Learning Forward Pennsylvania, and Learning Forward is an organization that is working very hard for professional learning and the idea of quality professional learning for every teacher every day so that every student can learn every day. And I'm also a Learning Forward Academy member. So as we think about this rather disruptive time that we're in, so 3 questions to think about. What are you planning as a coach when basically at the point in time we're in, the only certainty right now is uncertainty? How are you going to measure your impact as a coach this school year? Because a lot of the things that we've used in the past to measure whether or not we're an effective coach really are not in play this year. And what exactly is your coaching playbook for this year? So on the next slide, going to have you take a look for a minute and going to have you look and see which one of these Mona Lisas best describe how you feel right now. And if you would put that in the chat, the number that most describes you and your current educational model. So are you right now, are you face-to-face? Are you hybrid, which might have people face-to-face and might have kids streaming in also for live streaming? And are you virtual? Just 100% totally virtual. So I'll give you a moment for that. So it looks like the largest answer we have right now is people feeling like they're Mona Lisa, number 8, the one that kind of has the white strip of hair here a little bit. And face-to-face seems to be the most common way that we're meeting right now. So this has really been a year unlike any other. Everyone at this point is experiencing things that we have never, ever experienced before. And the question really is, the challenges that we face are new and novel. So the solutions we've been using in the past may not really work. So how do we really navigate this year in a year that we really don't have any map at all? So curse of knowledge, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but this is a really interesting phenomenon. So the idea is experts beware. Curse of knowledge, if you haven't heard of it, it basically means that the more familiar you are with something, the harder it is to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's not familiar with it. In other words, you can't unlearn what you've learned, and you can't see it with fresh eyes anymore. According to Ked Codinger, who is from the Carnegie Mellon University, he says that experts can really only articulate about 30% of what they know. The other part is actually what he calls hidden learning. And hidden learning means you can do something and you are an expert at it, but you really can't explain or break it down to somebody else. Stanford University ran some really interesting studies about this phenomenon, and they found that while experts are able to outline and explain the knowledge of what to do, they can't explain the detailed steps anymore, and they really forget what it was like when they were a novice at something. So what does this mean for us in the time that we're in right now? It actually has a lot to do with the current educational model. So experts have a lot of tools that are out of commission in their toolbox right now. And experts don't really remember how hard it was their first year of teaching. And right now in this environment, everyone is a first year teacher or coach this year. So in the chat box, I'm going to ask you again, if you would participate, what have you lost with regard to relationship coaching practices that you did in the past and that either you can't do right now or you have to do something different instead? So what kind of things have you lost as a coach or with your coaching practices? And if you would react to that in the chat box. So one of the things that I'm seeing is the idea of meeting in person, and that it's now not so easy to be in touch with people as it was before. We used to be able to just go down the hall, used to be able to pick up the phone, walk into someone's classroom, and we really can't do that anymore. That's something that's really powerful that we've been missing. Something else that we're missing is feeling authentically connected with people. Kind of feel like there's a separation. If we have to work through a computer right now, that's very difficult. If you have to teach in a face-to-face environment wearing a mask, that really hides all the micro expressions and things that we do when we teach. And looking at students' eyes or looking at our teachers' eyes alone sometimes doesn't give us the full picture of what they understand or what they're thinking. Another one, being able to observe the whole classroom and see what's going on. Right now, it's a bunch of boxes in Zoom, perhaps, or maybe you have a few kids in front of you and the boxes. That's also something that's really, really hard. So in today's lesson, we're going to go over a couple of things. Going to go over what I call the 3 R's and an L. So if you remember the traditional R's of education where you're reading, writing, and arithmetic, for coaches, 3 R's that we typically work in the area of are relationships, resilience, and reflection. And of course, the L then is learning. So the presentation is going to be kind of divided into 2 parts. So in the first half, we're going to talk about the relationships and the resilience. And then in the second half, going to flip over to reflection and learning. So in the chat box one more time, I'm going to ask you out of those 4 areas that are listed underneath chat box 2, relationships, resilience, reflection, and learning, which do you feel the strongest and which do you feel the most challenged right now in this COVID environment that we're working in to coach our staff? So looking in the chat, I'm seeing some people are responding that they feel that they're very strong in learning. Learning is certainly a big thing right now. A lot of the things are new and novel. In a blended learning class, you typically take up to a year to plan a blended learning class, to roll it out, to plan the assessments, to train your teachers. And we really didn't have that with COVID. Basically, the plug was pulled on us. A challenge area, it looks like some people are feeling that they're challenged in relationships, holding those relationships, growing those relationships. That's a big area that we tend to have challenges in right now. Reflection is an area that some people are responding that is really important right now. And reflection really is, because one of the best ways you get better at something is reflecting, not just continually doing and iterating. And relationship is another one that people feel that is really important right now. So we're going to move into the first part of this, which is the building relationship piece. And on this piece, I'm going to show you a couple plays. So today we're going to go through about 9 plays that coaches or leaders can use in this environment, kind of to add to your playbook. So the first one is play number 1 is how do you grow professional relationships? And the reason that we do this is because it's really important to stay connected and develop personal relationships and professional relationships. And in order to do this well, it takes time, work, and strategy. It's often a problem when we're not deliberate about our approach to building relationships. We emphasize the importance of them, but we often don't do deliberate practices. And sometimes in the past, we haven't had to be so deliberate about this. We were able just to do this more informally because we could go down the hall, go into someone's classrooms. And now with this disconnect, it's a little harder to do. So here are some ways that we can think about perhaps growing professional relationships. So the first way is through a Google form. And right now, relationships, feedback, and information basically is the gasoline in your tank right now. And you are not going to know what to do if you're not cultivating these right now. I don't know about you, but email for me is an absolute nightmare. The number of emails that I get a day. So if I create a Google form and have teachers communicate with me that way, teachers' needs, teachers' questions don't get all lost in my email right now. So one of the ways I do that is not only to create needs, but also to see what kind of things are working well. And that way I'm informed about what's going well, and I can kind of share that out. So if a group of teachers is particularly strong in something and another group of teachers is struggling with it, I can create some kind of collaboration with them for that. That's often very, very helpful. Positive notes. I don't know how many of you have what I used to call an HABDF file, a having a bad day file. Writing positive notes to teachers gives them a little affirmation, a little gas in their tank. I try to be intentional about that. I try to do 1 or 2 of these a day, really authentically giving positive notes or notes of encouragement to people. I will sometimes handwrite them. Sometimes I also do e-cards. E-cards are nice now because you can just send them, especially when you're working in a virtual environment. Just send them to people. Hashtag review, the next bullet, that's something that I'm going to be starting. Hashtag is creating something on social media to shine a light on positive things that are happening. So we can retweet about exceptional practices, and doing this shows staff members that we value what they're doing and the work that they're doing. And the last one, following through on all commitments. I use Google Keep. If I promise that I'm going to get something or a resource to a teacher, and that way I kind of have a running list. It's nice, it's electronic. I used to write it down on paper, and then sometimes I would remember, sometimes I wouldn't. So when it's in Google Keep, then it's attached to my Google Calendar, and it's real easy to remember. So those are some things that we can do to grow professional relationships in this environment. Second play is having really good structured conversations. And the reason this is important is that in a normal year, I would go and reconnect with staff just informally. I might run into them at the copier, in the staff lounge. Teachers would just drop by my office, the do you have a minute type of thing. And before and after meetings, I could kind of be there early and stay late with teachers. And right now, I can't really do that. So I need to be really intentional about how I'm building and maintaining my professional relationships. So working together as a team is really important. So each month, I'm kind of having these structured conversations with teachers. So in September, I tried to purposely go and have conversations with people to reconnect, find out what their needs were, wanted to convey to them that they're not alone, that we're in this together. And I try and collect information. So I kind of had a spreadsheet. I had all of my teachers in my building, all 80 of them on there. And each day I would go before and after school, or when I knew that they had a prep, and just do informal drop-ins. My goal each day was to do 4 a day and get through 20 in the entire week. If I had a good day, I might be able to catch more, but my goal was by the end of the week to always have 20. And the idea is to get through the building every month and then, rinse and repeat and do it again in October. This time though, I'd be going in and talking about what's working and what's not. Right now we're in a hybrid model. We have some kids face-to-face and we have kids live streaming in. So my questions in October are going to be around that and around seeing where teachers are, because it's pretty taxing to be doing this. So I know some teachers are really, really feeling it, feeling like they're burned out, feeling like a brand new teacher for the first year all over again. So we're going to move to resilience here for the next one. I'm going to ask you to respond again in the chat box. So what are some ways right now in this time of COVID that you are working to build resilience in your staff as a coach or as a leader? What are some ways that you're working to build resilience in your staff as a coach or as a leader? So one of the things I'm seeing in the chat is trying to help them see that things won't always be this way. And that really is a big thing, because a lot of people feel really stuck. They feel stuck for two reasons. One, a lot of people feel stuck because it seems like it's been 6 months. It feels like it's been going on forever. It feels like it's never going to end. So it kind of feels like you're in this Groundhog Day over and over and over again. The other thing with the building resilience and seeing that it won't always be this way is it's sometimes really hard to see how hard teachers and staff are working, and the fact that this is only temporary. So a lot of these tools that they're getting, while some of them will carry over, they're not going to be able to take everything over when we go back to quote unquote normal again, seeing everybody face to face. They're going to have some advanced tools, but they're not going to just be able to take it and put it in there. So that's very disheartening for staff. And that's something that you have to work on to try to build resilience. Another thing that I'm seeing in the chat is remembering the other challenges that we've conquered. There are a lot of things as teachers, whether they're initiatives, whether they're things that are happening in the building, or things that certain areas or schools are experiencing. It's a really, really a good idea. And that's an excellent idea in the chat about remembering other challenges that we've conquered or that we've done together before. So we're going to get to play number 3. This one's under resilience. So the what for this play is, how can we intentionally build in rituals for sharing and celebrating learning and success? And this is something that's going to be really important to address the technical and adaptive changes that we're facing right now in reopening schools. We need to intentionally replace what's lost and make people comfortable in what's new. We need to strengthen relationships, and we really need to work on reducing anxiety. So the loss of casual interactions, togetherness, sometimes that doesn't feel the same when we're working at a distance, and that's really going to impact in our relationships and how people feel. If we plan for the loss of togetherness, we can create a sense of teamwork. So I'm going to show you a couple of things in here. I'm going to put something in the chat here about new organizational rituals underneath the how here. So I have an article that has some really good ideas if you perhaps haven't thought of things, or you're looking for some more things in your toolbox about how we might intentionally build these rituals and relationships. So the first one, there's an article here, and they talk about having a graduation ceremony for new talent, which is a really neat idea that we can do to create some new rituals since we're losing a lot of our old ones. A design thinking drip engagement activity is in there that you can take a look at. Crash the desk. This one's a neat ritual that everybody, when somebody is new on the team, they put something special or significant on the person's desk, and the person arrives to work and they see that everything's been little things from different teachers. You can do this virtually. We've done it in a Zoom room where we crash the meeting and welcome a new person and share things in there. So there's kind of neat things that you can do with that. The second one, making meetings matter in this new one. This is something that's going to be really important. Everybody's heard and probably experienced by now Zoom fatigue. So when we have meetings, and having been in education now for, this is my 33rd year, I've attended a lot of meetings. And if I could have back some of the times that I spent in those meetings, I would probably look about 23 again, because not all of those meetings have been really effective. But if we can think of ways to keep meetings meaningful and keep them short, this is something that we're really not very good at. That would be really helpful with our staff. So for example, faculty meetings. Can we send some of that information out for faculty meetings that could be in an email, and then flip the faculty meeting where we're actually showing them, for example, how to use different tools? And we're using, for example, Nearpods and clickers and Padlet and Jamboard and things like that in our faculty meeting, that then teachers get an idea of some tools they can carry back into their classrooms. If you've never heard of the idea of figuring out how much it costs you to actually run a meeting, there's something that I'm going to share with you in the chat here. There is a estimating the cost of meetings calculator. And if you've never done this, it's kind of interesting. It's also rather jaw-dropping when you take a look at it. But what you do with this, and I'm going to put that right in there right now, is you go there, and it's a free tool. There's going to be like a pop-up advertisement. Just click off on that. But you actually figure out, it'll ask you how many people are coming to the meeting, and it asks you the general salary of the person, of each one of the people. So if I have 4 people, it's going to ask me, what's the general salary of each one of those 4 people? It's going to ask me how long the meeting is. And then it's going to tell me what my quote unquote cost is for having this meeting. That's kind of eye-opening when you have an hour meeting, what it's actually costing the district or costing you to actually have the meeting. That's something that's kind of eye-opening and interesting to do. Some other things you can do to make meetings matter: have an agenda, share it in advance, keep the meeting short and focused. Have Zoom stand-up meetings where the meeting is not going to last any more than 10 minutes and everybody basically stands. We used to do these face-to-face in our building where we would have stand-up meetings. Everybody would come 10 minutes, nobody sat down, and everybody left. That way we would purposely keep the meeting short. But you want to avoid the classic, this meeting could have been an email pitfall. The third one on here, a Post-it note protocol. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this is a neat, and I'm going to put a tool in for this one. This is a neat thing that I found where you actually have these signs or Post-it notes. And during meetings, you can just kind of, I don't know if that link took or not. You can actually hold these up. So for example, you've all been in meetings where, you say 20,000 times, hey, so-and-so, you're muted. You actually just quietly hold up a Post-it note that shows that. It actually adds a little bit of humor to your meeting, actually keeps things going without somebody having to verbally interrupt. But there are these Post-it notes, you just run them off, and people have them for meetings. They'll hold them up and show them. So that's a third play that you can do for that. So play number 4 here. If you're coaching your teachers, and whether you're a coach or whether you're an administrator, the idea of tiering your coaching support to teachers is something that is a great idea that you can do. So we all know that instructional coaching or leadership coaching increases the achievement and engagement of teachers and of students to try to bring out the best performance in your teachers. It involves an ongoing cycle, and there are many different coaching cycles. This is just one that I kind of put in here to show you in case you don't have a coaching cycle. So it's the idea of you're going to do some kind of goal setting, some kind of learning, observation, data collection, and reflection. And you may have teachers coming into this cycle with you at many different points. There isn't necessarily a start and a stop point, but all coaching, whether it's good coaching, involves setting goals. And to that, you want to have a really, really clear goal. Even though we're in a time of COVID, we shouldn't stop doing goals, because if we don't have any goals, we don't know whether or not we're measuring or meeting them or not. So this coaching cycle is something that you can do. And what I do is, and I'm going to show you on the next slide how I actually do this. So everyone gets coaching support and differentiated coaching support that's differentiated for what they need. So I basically tell my teachers this up front. You're going to get, now I don't necessarily show them what the schedule is, but they know that some teachers are getting coached by me a little more often than others. And my answer is that, people are working through different things at different times. But basically on my schedule, I tier my teachers into 3 levels. And struggling teachers or new teachers, I try to get on my schedule that I am having a short meeting with them every 1 or 2 weeks. And I make sure I put them in. Teachers who I find that are proficient, they're pretty strong teachers, have a real good sense of what's going on, maybe are feeling pretty good about this environment that we're in. I schedule them to have a touch point coaching meeting with them every 2 or 3 weeks. And then those teachers who basically are my superstars, who are my front runners, who will take anything and run with it, who have a good attitude, who really aren't struggling, I put them in once a month. But I try to get everyone kind of through this. And if I don't, as a coach, do this intentionally, it's not getting done, because basically I'm going to be coaching like crazy for COVID. So somebody just remarked in the chat that this is kind of like MTSS for teachers. It kind of is. And like I said, just like I would tell my students when I taught for 29 years, when kids would be like, well, this person's getting this and I'm not getting this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, right now that's something that you don't seem to need. You're doing just fine. So even though we're adults, sometimes we, look and see, oh, look what Jethro's getting and I'm not getting it. So kind of play it off the same way that I do with my teachers. And again, I don't necessarily tell them those things, but that's kind of basically what I'm doing. All right. So play number 5. So I tier my coaches. I also tier my PLCs, my professional learning communities. Every PLC gets coaching and differentiated support for what they need. And I kind of do this the same way that I do with my teachers that I coach. And while coaching individual teachers is great, the place money-wise as a coach that I quote unquote get my bang for my buck is with these PLCs, because I have multiple teachers. And that way, an hour spent with one teacher is one thing, but with this, an hour spent, and I've got a group of 5 or 6 people in a PLC, I really can get a lot of bang for my buck for this. So again, what I do is I kind of look in a PLC cycle what these teachers are doing or not doing. So I sometimes watch by coming into their Zoom meetings, or when we're face-to-face, coming into their meetings and sitting there and, being part of the discussion, but kind of listening and kind of seeing where they are. And are they going through all the steps? Are they doing goal setting? Are they setting SMART goals? Are they having data meetings? Or are they just planning? So I kind of level them also. Who's struggling? Who doesn't understand that PLC is more than planning? Who's proficient? They're kind of going through everything, but maybe they're spending a little longer or not as long on something. And who are my superstars? Who have the cycle down, and who are responding to the 4 questions? They're responding to the questions of, what do we want students to learn? How will we know when they've learned it? What are we going to do for the students who didn't learn or who already know it? And what are we going to do when the students know it? So my superstars who kind of get that too. So instructional shifts. I also, with my PLCs, I'm on one of these. So groups, I always start here at the highest level with them to see if they'll be responsive to the questions that I'm asking them. So reflect, I inquire and probe. If I'm not getting a lot of traction there, I kind of move over to collaborate, kind of like, well, let's brainstorm, let's do some problem solving. If I'm not getting a lot of traction there with the PLC, then I kind of move over to advise or teach. Maybe I'll model a lesson, ask them, oh, would you like me to model that? That way you can see what's working, what's not, that kind of thing. And if I have a PLC that's completely struggling, that is never coming out of planning at all, then kind of like while I won't supervise them as a supervisor because I'm non-evaluative, I will instruct them. Kind of, do we know what the 4 questions are? Do we know there is a cycle? Do we know that PLCs are more than planning? Now, my tone will be better with them when I do that, but that's basically what I'm going to do with tiering my PLCs for that. All right, so we're going to move to the third part here. We're going to move to learning a little bit. And with this one, I'm going to ask you to take a moment, please, and if you'd react again in the chat. How are you delivering professional learning now as a coach or as a leader? And how is the mode that you're using it being received? So how are you now delivering professional learning? Because what you may have done pre-COVID may look differently. And how is that being received by your teachers? So I'll give you a moment here. Take a look. Okay, so some people are trying to meet with people virtually when possible. And that's one way. I would be curious as to when you meet with them virtually, if you're actually delivering anything or you're just kind of finding out how they're doing and what they need type of thing. Not that one is necessarily bad, but I do know that if we're only checking for that, which is probably what a lot of people are doing right now, it probably isn't moving the needle forward. It's great and it's supportive and it is meeting teachers like right where they need, but we also have a responsibility to kind of move the needle forward. So that might be something that I may have some ideas that you might think about incorporating here in the next part. Okay, so let's take a look at place 6. All right, so building in micro-professional learning at this point and opportunities to learn from peers. These are 2 really high leverage strategies right now that if you can do, you can get a lot of forward motion happening with. Honestly, the PL that I used to do, like we used to have every couple of weeks, we had like an hour of professional learning for PLCs, how to run data meetings, how to run protocols, things like that. That really isn't working that much right now. So what I started doing is I started doing a weekly newsletter. I am going to virtual PLCs. I am the PLCs that are still face-to-face. I am meeting with them at school. But I put out a weekly newsletter and I do it on Wednesday. The reason that I do that is Wednesday, our teachers all meet with their kids just quickly, synchronously through live stream. And then the rest of the day, they're working asynchronously. Teachers are having things like drop-in office hours for kids. They're having small groups. But they have a lot of time that's off. So I purposely time my newsletter to come on Wednesday because that's when teachers have a little more time to look at it. And I divide it. Jethro kindly put a s'more link in there. You can take a look at what one of my newsletters looks like. I divide my PL portion of it into what I call a 1-5-15 section. So basically I provide professional learning on a topic. So right now it's concurrent teaching because that's what our teachers are doing. They're having kids in front of them and kids virtually at the same time, which is a really difficult model to manage. And it's a really taxing model, both on the teachers and on the students, because it kind of feels like lose-lose because your attention's divided. So in my I do 1 minute of professional learning. I give them an idea, a picture, an infographic, something on this to kind of move the needle forward for concurrent learning, for ideas of what you could do. 5 minutes, I put something in there that would take about 5 minutes. Sometimes it's a reading, sometimes it's a video. I try and mix it up, but something that would take about 5 minutes for teachers to look at. And then I have one that's a longer one that's 15. Again, it could be something that I want them to read, a podcast I want them to hear, or something like that. And teachers can kind of look and check. Nice thing about SMORE is I can see analytics anytime I put links in. Not only can I see who accessed the newsletter and for how long, I can also see what links that they're looking at and how long they're spending. So that kind of gives me data, that gasoline in the tank, to go back and for the next newsletter to know, okay, well, a lot of teachers looked at this, so let's build on that type of thing. Or, gee, this was a great idea, but nobody looked at it, so that's dead in the water. I'm not gonna resurrect that zombie again. I'm going to do something different. So that's one of the things I do. Chat and chew, lunch events. That's something that I do. I have like drop-in office hours. Sometimes I have a chat and chew in the afternoon. Sometimes I have a coffee with coaches. And what I do with that is I meet with teachers. Sometimes I talk informally. Sometimes I'll set up a specific theme that I'm doing and say, hey, if you want to learn about X, Y, or Z, I'm going to be sharing a little bit of information about that. I give them a little micro piece of that learning, and then we talk about it, how they implement it, what it looks like. And then I follow up to see how teachers are doing. The other one, now this one was published, this is pre-COVID, but one of the things that I did was I did a series of micro-credentials that teachers could access in our school. And it was one of the first pilots of it. So micro-learning that teachers were doing. And I wrote an article about that in Learning Forward. So I see that link is not working. I will see if we can figure that out and figure out what the, oh, thank you. That article is on page 60 to 64 if you want to take a look at it. It does have some other neat things with professional learning in that whole magazine if you want to take a look. But my article is on 60 to 64. If you've never thought about doing micro credentials or something like that, that's something that you might want to take a look at. So that would be play 6 for that. All right, so play 7, action protocol. So I often say that dolphins have sonar to try to figure out like what's in front of them, what's around them, what's working. Dolphins have sonar, coaches have questions. So the more powerful your questions are as a coach, the more powerful it is to kind of move the needle forward or to help people or to get people unstuck or to have people actually go for action. So I have an action protocol that I sometimes use with teachers, questions to help move them to get to goal setting and taking action, especially right now because everything seems to be imminent that needs to be done. And when you're trying to do everything, every shiny object, you don't really get any forward action. So on the next slide, it'll show you what some protocol questions look like that I ask them. So if I'm working with somebody and I'm trying to get them to do goals or outcomes, those are some questions that I might ask in a coaching meeting that I might have with them or with the PLC. I'll use these questions for that. For exploration. So sometimes I'll see PLCs or I'll see individual teachers. They really don't have any clear goal. And if you don't have any clear goal, then you don't really know if you're going to hit it or not. So if I want to try to get them to come up with a goal or to kind of narrow their focus, those are some questions I might ask to explore that a little bit more. On the next slide, you're going to see some questions that I have for options. So sometimes I have teachers who come at something and they're kind of stuck, tunnel vision, one way to do this, one idea. So if I want to kind of open it up, those are some questions that I might ask to help them consider options before they decide on one thing. Decisions, I have some PLCs and I have some teachers who really are not really good at the decision-making thing. They don't want to commit or they're not sure. So those are some questions I might ask them. What would be easiest? What would be most impactful? What out of all the options, which would you most like to pursue? And then the final slide on this play 7 has some questions that I use and ask teachers for action. So sometimes I have teachers or PLCs that are all talk, but I can't really get them to get the rubber to meet the road type of thing. So these are some questions that I would ask them. So I might say, let's turn that idea into an action step. What exactly will you do? And then I follow up with them a little later to see how it went. What date do you think you'll have this done? Are there any obstacles that you think we need to address? What kind of support do you need? How could I support you? When would you like me to check in and see how you're doing about this? So those are some things for action. They're nice to have, especially when you see, because everybody struggles with something, when you see teachers struggling with a certain area with something. So that basically is my playbook number 7 that I use. All right, so the last section here, section 4, the third R here, reflection and feedback loops. This is something that's really important, and this is something that I worry about, that in the time of COVID, we're so worried about trying to get things going and get things moving that we forget about this reflection piece. So I'm going to ask you in the chat box, how are you having staff reflect right now? And what kind of feedback loops do you have in place right now with where you are with working with your teachers as a coach or leader? So how are you having staff reflect? And what kind of feedback loops do you have? Okay, so somebody responded that it's not happening much because staff are just trying to survive. And I can see that. That is very true. I honestly think, whatever date this is, I don't know, it's like Groundhog Day, October 7th, I think. This was one of the things that I realized early on, that as a coach, I had let this kind of go off my radar a bit, this reflection piece, because everybody was just trying to, get it up and get it going as fast as they possibly could. And everybody is trying to survive. And here's what worries me: if we don't get this piece reinstated and back in, which is something that I made myself do. We had basically in March, we had emergency remote teaching. That's what we had. Basically, the plug was pulled. In Pennsylvania, we were all home. We were suddenly expected to be virtual teachers, be 100% virtual, make it work, make it go. Teachers worked really, really hard. Teachers got to June, but we didn't really get any better. We didn't build in anything to collaborate with each other. We didn't build in anything to reflect on what was working, what was not. We didn't build in anything systemic to get better. And as a result, everybody did the best they could. Everybody ran their own race, but everybody almost got to the race almost as an individual in our district. So I don't want to have that happen again. So here are some things, play 8, feedback and reflection, that I kind of started building in when I saw this kind of slipping off my plate. So feedback is a really important part of progress, and we need to be gathering effective feedback, both formally and informally. Collecting feedback from staff to see what their needs are and to build their capacity is really, really important. So here are a couple things that I'm doing. And I see in the chat here, somebody remarked that their feedback loop is Google Forms, but they're not necessarily using it the way they should. Collecting data is one thing, responding to the data is another. And I use Google Forms for my weekly staff feedback. And I'm going to show you what kind of questions I ask. It's a very short form that I ask, but I make sure I get back to every single PLC. I either get back to them verbally if I happen to be, they're having a Zoom session the next day, or I get back to them by email with that. I want them to know that I'm reading it, that I'm taking it seriously, that I'm trying to get whatever kind of resources they have, and that they're being heard, which is really, really important. So what I do based on that is then I kind of go in with a two-step plan. So if you take a look at the next slide, you're going to see what that kind of looks like. So here are the 4 questions that I ask. They're not lengthy, but basically I ask them first what's 1 or 2 things that are working well for them. When I find out what those 2 things are, I kind of put that on a spreadsheet for myself, because I want to know who are the PLCs who think that they're doing something very, very strong. I'm going to use that later on if I get to number 2, something that's not working well for the PLCs. Is there something that you've resolved yourself? If not, tell me how you resolved it or how I might support you. And I'm going to start putting together PLCs who have strengths over time with PLCs who are having challenges. Because as a coach, there's only so many of me and there's 80 of them. So I need to kind of leverage that. So I'm going to be real intentional about how I use that. I asked the question number 3, what would help you the most right now? The way that question is worded, I got lucky on that one. The way that question is worded, I don't get a lot of unloading. I get a lot of very thoughtful things and responses that are sometimes within my control or within the teacher's control that I can help them with. Every so often, somebody will give me a humorous thing like, oh, well, Donna, why don't you find a vaccine for COVID? That would be nice. But they usually put a smiley face after that. How you word your questions is really important. And then the 4th one, if there's anything else they'd like us to know or a question they have, administration has access to these too, so they can see it. But every single week, we're getting feedback. So Jethro, could you go back to the slide in front of that just real quick? Because I want to real quickly talk about the other ones. So a quarterly staff survey, I send out a quarterly staff survey. So we're coming up on the end of the first marking quarter. I'll be sending that out to staff to get a little more depth information than just those 4 questions. Coaching conversations with reflective components. And those reflective components, if we go to the next 2 slides, Jethro, we could go past this one and then the next one, a reflection protocol. So here are some things that I use as a reflection protocol. And I don't always do this recipe-like, but some days are worse than others for me to be able to think things through. So I kind of always have this in my back pocket. I'll ask them questions like, I'll try to work through this. What were your initial thoughts or feelings about? Something that they wanted me to look for, a challenge that they're having from one of the forms. I'll ask them what evidence do they have, because I want to make sure that it's not just a feeling. They're overwhelmed and they're seeing something that's like microscopic, the size of an ant, and thinking it's a huge problem the size of an elephant, that it really isn't. What might be something that's contributing to the outcome? So I kind of ask that reflective question to get an idea from them what they think might be contributing. What insights are they having? What are you teaching yourself about you? And then I start moving them into action. What do you want now? What's the next step? What would it look like? What would the next step look like? When do you want to try this? What support can I give you? Do we need to practice the strategy? Is it something that we can model or we can practice? And then I ask them the final thing for the commitment. Is there anything that's standing in the way? Is this something you can commit to? When would you like me to check back in again? And then I mark that again on my my calendar, my Google Calendar, and I make sure that I check in. I try very hard to honor my commitments. I know teachers are doing an extremely heavy lift right now, and I want to try to do everything I can to support them as a coach. So that basically concludes my 9 plays that I'm working on right now. So if I can ask you real quickly, is there something that you would take away from today's webinar? And if you could put that in the chat. And I'm going to turn it back over here to Jethro.
Well, I think this was really great. Lots of good information about how to be a coach during this crazy year. And I just want to say thank you, Donna. This has been really fantastic and so many good ideas. And there will be a replay of this webinar. You can get that in your email, and you can also get it at jethrojones.com/coaches. And I think if you are prepared for coaching your teachers appropriately, you're going to be successful. So I want to show you what to do next. So you can attend webinars like this. You can get some support as much as possible. But what everybody really needs is that same support that Donna just explained to you to give to your teachers. We really need to give that to coaches as well. So here on this website, jethrojones.com/coaches, you can join the Instructional Coach Mastermind, which is going to give you that support day in and day out. And appreciate what Lynn put in the chat, that coaching in tiers is a big takeaway. I think that's really important. That was a great way to look at that. And then Kathy said, I really like the SMART article you shared. It resonated with her. And there's so many useful ideas to improve reflection and feedback. Those are really good pieces of feedback there. I want to talk just a little bit about this Instructional Coach Mastermind. You're going to get bi-weekly coaching with coaches from around the country. You're going to get a Strengths Finders test to help you know your own strengths. The communication cards that I use to help myself have difficult conversations with teachers and parents and other people as well. I'll also send you a copy of my new book, School X, which is also right here. Happen to have it right next to me. So pretty excited about that. This will help you figure out how to design your school to meet the needs of the people that are right there in front of you. And then the first 15 people who participate, they will have an extra Strengths Finder test there for them. So you can click the view offer that should just popped up on the top of your screen, or you can go to jethrojones.com/coaches. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here today. This has been a great opportunity. Donna, you just did a fantastic job. I really appreciate it. And once again, if you know an instructional coach, you can send them over to jethrojones.com/coaches. And I want to just end with this quote from Maya Angelou. And she says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that is really the truth. So thank you very much, Donna, for putting this together. Thank you for everybody who participated today, and all of you who are watching on the replay who made it all the way to the end. Good for you. Thank you so much. And this has been a wonderful, wonderful chat, and I appreciate everybody's support. Final words from you, Donna?
No, thanks. Thank you to everybody for coming out. Really appreciate it, and wish you well in the strangest of years.